The first time the Queen of Athelion saw the human, she ordered him executed on sight, her voice cold and regal as crystal, while the courtiers recoiled in a mix of fascination and fear, for never in 10,000 years had their silver palaces witnessed a creature like him, small by their standards yet unshaken before a throne carved from living starlight, his hands bound, his face bruised, but his eyes steady in a way that rattled even the royal guards in their obsidian armor, as if he were studying them rather than pleading for his life. And that quiet defiance made Queen Lysandra narrow her glowing eyes, convinced that this soft-skinned outsider was a threat simply because he refused to bow, refused to tremble, refused to be anything less than human. Rylan Ward did not know the customs of he did not know that standing tall in the presence of the Queen was an offense worthy of death, or that the slightest hesitation in kneeling meant treason. All he knew was that he had crashed on their moon while fleeing pirates, and now he was surrounded by towering figures, with silver hair and armor that shimmered like liquid mirrors. Yet, even in the heart of the Queen's radiant hall, he sensed something strange beneath the beauty, a tension that pulsed like a hidden wound, as if the court feared their own ruler as much as they obeyed her. And that fear wrapped around him like a cold fog. Queen Lysandra rose from her throne in a swirl of golden silk, her voice ringing across the chamber with a power that felt like thunder trapped in crystal, demanding to know who he served, what purpose he had in trespassing on sacred ground, and why he dared meet her gaze without permission. But Rylan answered with the same calm he used to survive battlefields back home, telling her he had no allegiance but to his own survival, that he was not spying, that he meant no harm, and that he simply sought shelter, which shocked the court, for no one spoke to the Queen with such plain courage, and murmurs rippled through the hall like wind disturbing still water. Lysandra's advisers whispered urgently that perhaps the human should be questioned privately, perhaps interrogated more thoroughly, perhaps studied, for humans were a rare species known for unpredictable resilience. But the Queen silenced them with a raised hand, stepping closer to Rylan with the slow grace of a blade being drawn. She told him no one entered Athelion and left alive unless they proved their worth or their innocence, and since he offered neither, his fate was sealed. Yet when she leaned close enough that he could see the faint glow in her irises, she froze, for he did not flinch, he did not shrink away. He simply met her gaze, as if she were not a towering cosmic monarch, but another person, something no one had ever dared. That single moment unsettled her court, for the Queen valued power above all things, and the sight of someone, undaunted by her, shattered the perfection of her authority. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons, the nobles whispered of curses and omens, and the high priestess began chanting softly, as if trying to purify the chamber. But Rylan remained still, and the Queen drew back with a flicker of something she had not felt in centuries, curiosity mixed with irritation. She demanded he explain how a fragile being like him dared show such disregard, and he replied simply that fear was a choice, and he had stopped choosing it long ago. The Queen's lips curved into a cold smile, one that made even the marble pillars tremble, as the hall dimmed in response to her mood. She declared that if he refused to fear her, then he would earn his death in the arena, where the beasts of Athelion devoured anything unworthy. But Rylan surprised them again by saying he would accept any challenge if it meant proving he was no threat. Those words rippled through the court like lightning, for the arena was sacred and unforgiving, and no outsider had ever walked into it alive. Yet the human spoke as though he believed survival was still possible, as though he had faced worse and lived. Lysandra found herself studying him instead of dismissing him, noticing the stubborn set of his jaw, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the unwavering steadiness in his posture, all details that should have meant nothing but somehow stirred a memory deep within her, of ancient texts describing a species that endured storms, wars, plagues, and cosmic fire through nothing but willpower, and she wondered if perhaps this was why the stars had delivered him to her doorstep. Still, she refused to show weakness. She ordered the guards to take him to the holding chamber. Yet, as they dragged him away, something in her chest tightened, an uncomfortable sensation she had not felt in centuries. Rylan was escorted through corridors carved from luminous stone, past windows revealing skies of swirling violet clouds, and though the guards remained silent, he could sense their confusion. He could feel their eyes on him as if trying to understand why he walked without stumbling, why he did not beg, why he did not tremble, and he wondered what kind of ruler inspired such brittle loyalty, for their armor gleamed like perfection but their eyes carried shadows. as though serving the queen meant sacrificing pieces of themselves one command at a time, and he began to suspect that her power was not as absolute as she pretended. When he reached the holding chamber, a small figure stepped out from the shadows, a young attendant with silver skin and wide glowing eyes. She told him in a trembling voice that no one challenged the queen and lived, that even nobles feared crossing her, and that he should have begged for mercy. But Rylan only offered a small reassuring nod, saying fear was not the only way to survive. Sometimes standing firm frightened tyrants more than obedience ever could. The attendant stared at him with a mixture of awe and confusion, whispering that humans were stranger and braver than she had ever imagined. Meanwhile, the queen returned to her throne, yet she found herself unable to shake the image of the human's unwavering eyes. She replayed the moment over and over, remembering how he faced her without armor, without magic, without lineage, and still refused to fall to his knees, and this haunted her, for she had built an empire on the belief that all beings broke under pressure. Yet Rylan had not broken, even for a heartbeat. Her advisors continued urging caution, suggesting he might have hidden abilities, but Lysandra dismissed them with a wave, though her heart remained restless like a caged storm. The court buzzed with rumors, nobles whispered about omens and prophecies, scholars debated whether humans possessed unknown strengths, and the queen's rivals quietly plotted to use this event as evidence that her fear-enforcing rule was weakening. Yet Lysandra ignored them all, choosing instead to descend the stairs and walk alone through the quiet gardens outside the hall, where the flowers glowed softly in the moonlight. She thought of the human's words, "Fear is a choice." No one had spoken to her like that in millennia, and it struck her like a challenge she was not prepared to accept. As Rylan sat in the holding chamber, he examined the strange runes etched into the walls, sensing power humming around him like a living barrier. But instead of despair, he focused on breathing, on planning, on calculating how to survive whatever the arena held. Meanwhile, the young attendant returned with a whispered warning that the queen herself would watch his trial, something unheard of for a mere outsider, and Rylan realized with a slow, steady certainty that he had become more than a prisoner. He had become a question the queen could not ignore, a disruption to a court built on fear, and that alone might be the very thing that kept him alive. At dawn, the guards escorted Rylan through a series of spiraling corridors that descended into the heart of the palace, each step echoing like a countdown in the luminous stone, the air buzzing with ancient enchantments woven into the walls by generations of Athelion monarchs. And though the guards kept their faces expressionless, he could sense the weight of their unease, a silent acknowledgement that the arena was not a place of justice but a stage for punishment, the queen's favorite instrument of control. Yet Rylan walked with calm steps, every muscle alert, every breath steady, determined to face whatever monstrous trial waited in the depths, for fear had no place left within him. Queen Lysandra watched from a balcony carved high above the entrance to the arena, her golden veil drifting in the cool breeze like a living flame. Though she maintained the stern composure expected of a monarch, her mind churned with unanswered questions. The human's defiance had unsettled her in a way she had not expected, and part of her had come here not to witness his failure, but to understand him. For something in his gaze had struck her like a fracture through her perfect control, as though his refusal to break had exposed a flaw in her rule that she had outlawed herself from acknowledging. Still, she told herself that this was merely protocol and nothing more, when in truth the human had already become a thread pulling at the very fabric of her authority. The arena floor opened before Rylan, like a massive crater of shimmering sand, its surface alive with soft ripples of energy that moved as if reacting to the presence of fresh prey. Towering pillars of crystal curved inward from the edges, amplifying the echoes of every breath, and above them thousands of nobles filled the obsidian seats, their silver eyes shining with anticipation, curiosity, fear, and hunger for spectacle. They had come expecting to witness the quick end of an outsider. Yet, as Rylan stepped into the center of the arena, a hush fell over them, for instead of trembling, he stood tall, surveying the battlefield as though he had trained for it all his life. And this unexpected composure caused even the most jaded noble to lean forward in wary fascination. A deep rumble surged from beneath the sand, and the ground trembled as the first of the queen's sacred beasts emerged. A massive serpentine creature with scales like molten glass, its jaws lined with rows of shimmering fangs, its eyes burning with primal fury. The nobles gasped as the arena walls pulsed with ancient energy, amplifying the creature's presence. Yet Rylan's focus sharpened. his survival instincts igniting like wildfire. He observed the creature's breathing, the tension in its coils, the slight hesitation before it strikes, and in those details he found rhythm rather than terror. For humans learned to survive by reading danger, adapting to it, and bending their fear into strategy. And it was this very adaptability that made the queen watch him with newfound intrigue, rather than certainty of his demise. The beast lunged with a roar that vibrated through the entire arena, its crystalline fangs snapping inches from Rylan's chest, but he rolled beneath it with precision, landing in the sand as the creature's momentum carried it forward. Nobles gasped, some rising in shock while others whispered that no outsider should move with such speed. Rylan grabbed a shard of broken crystal kicked up during the beast's impact and used it to slash at a soft patch beneath its scales. Not a killing blow, but enough to make the creature recoil. This moment of resistance sent a ripple through the crowd, a tremor of disbelief, for they had seen countless challengers swallowed whole within seconds. Yet this human not only evaded death, but countered it. And in the queen's chest something tightened again. Not irritation this time, but fascination. The creature circled him, enraged, its tail slicing through the air with enough force to shatter stone. But Rylan anticipated each movement, watching the tension in its muscles, the rhythm of its shifting weight, the narrow moment before each strike when instinct overrode thought. He used these patterns like footholds, ducking under the sweeping tail and driving his improvised weapon into the joints of the creature's armor-like scales. Each strike calculated, each movement fueled by survival rather than fear. And the crowd's murmurs grew louder, shifting from dismissive whispers to stunned admiration. Even the queen leaned forward slightly, her fingers tightening on the balcony edge as she realized that this fragile outsider fought with a determination she had long forgotten existed among her own people. At last, with a burst of desperate energy, Rylan climbed onto the beast's back, clinging to its thrashing form as it writhed in fury. Nobles cried out as he stabbed again and again at the vulnerable ridge along its spine, until the great creature collapsed into the sand with a trembling shudder. Rylan dropped beside it, panting but alive, blood dripping from his hands, sweat streaking his face. Yet he stood, pushing himself upright as the arena went silent. The nobles stared in disbelief. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, and the queen found herself breathless as she watched him. For no one had defeated the crystal serpent in centuries, not even her greatest champions. And the realization that a lone human had accomplished it without armor or magic sent shockwaves through her court. The silence lasted only a moment before the nobles erupted into shouts, some praising the spectacle, others demanding a second trial, insisting the queen must prove the outsider's success was chance and not skill. But Lysandra raised her hand and the entire arena fell still. Her voice carried through the space with icy command as she declared that the human had passed the first test. Yet she refused to end the trial so quickly, for she needed clarity, not coincidence. She ordered the release of the twin guardians, two massive obsidian beasts forged from ancient spells, unstoppable forces of the arena. The nobles gasped in awe, for this decision was unprecedented. No trial had ever included three beasts. Yet, Lysandra's eyes remained fixed on Rylan, as if searching for something she had lost in herself, something she feared, yet longed to reclaim. The ground split again, and the twin guardians rose from the depths, their bodies sculpted from dark crystal, their movements fluid despite their immense size, their eyes flickering with violent blue fire. Rylan swallowed once, feeling the tremor of danger ripple through him, but he steadied himself, adjusting his stance. Knowing that retreat was impossible, he circled slowly, studying the guardians, noting the way they mirrored each other's movements, a synchronized killing pattern, and he realized he could not defeat them by brute force. He needed to break their rhythm, disrupt their unity, force them into separate paths, and this thought ignited a spark of hope within him, not confidence of victory, but certainty of purpose, the same certainty that had carried him through every impossible battlefield back home. The guardians charged as one, their crystalline claws carving deep pits through the sand, but Rylan sprinted toward the nearest pillar, using it as cover, forcing the beasts to adjust their angle. Breaking the symmetry of their attack, he darted between them like a shadow, ducking under a sweeping limb and leaping over a jagged strike of crystal, sparks flying with every missed blow. The arena crackled with energy as the nobles shouted in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a human moved with such raw instinct. And above them Queen Lysandra watched with widened eyes, her breath uneven, for this outsider had done more than survive. He had challenged her understanding of power itself, a truth she could not ignore. Even as the arena thundered with the echo of claws and shattered crystal, Rylan realized that the Guardians relied on perfect harmony, each movement reflecting the other like twin blades forged from the same fire. So he changed his tactics. Instead of attacking directly, he focused on disrupting their balance, darting across the sand in unpredictable patterns, forcing them to adjust, to hesitate, to shift weight out of sync. Each second of broken rhythm weakened their collective force, and the nobles began to murmur in amazement as they watched the human turn the arena from a place of execution into a battlefield of strategy. The queen herself felt an unfamiliar thrill as she leaned forward, the golden light of her balcony shimmering across her eyes while she studied the human with growing intensity. He seized an opportunity when one guardian lunged faster than the other. Rylan rolled beneath its crystalline torso and struck at the joint where its forelimb connected. The creature staggered, the delay small but crucial, for it created a rift in the perfect unity they had maintained. The second beast stumbled as its synchronized motion faltered, and Rylan drove himself toward another pillar, using the momentum of the Guardian's mass to smash them into the stone. Shards of black crystal shattered across the arena floor like dark stars, and the crowd roared with shock, unable to comprehend how an unarmored outsider dared treat the sacred beasts as mere obstacles. Yet every movement he made was rooted not in arrogance but survival, instinct sharpened by countless trials that had shaped humanity into something fierce and enduring. The Guardians shrieked, a sound like grinding stone echoing through the luminous sand, their blue fire eyes flaring as they recalibrated their assault. But Rylan refused to yield. He leaped onto the back of the weakened Guardian, clinging to its jagged spine with bloodied hands. Ignoring the pain slicing through his palms, he wedged a broken crystal shard into the seam of its armor-like plates, twisting with every ounce of strength until the creature convulsed and collapsed, its massive form sinking into the sand. The nobles erupted into chaos, some rising in awe, while others recoiled in horror at the sight of a creature they believed invincible, falling to a mortal's determination. And Queen Lysandra felt her heart pound with an intensity she had not allowed herself to feel in centuries. The second Guardian howled in rage, charging toward Rylan with enough force to shatter a mountain. But Rylan rolled aside, staggering from exhaustion, his vision blurring, sand sticking to the sweat and blood on his skin. Yet he forced his legs to move, forced himself to breathe. The queen watched him with narrowed eyes, seeing a will stronger than magic woven into mortal flesh, a resilience that defied every rule of power she had lived by. And something deep within her began to crack, a fragile fault line forming between the ruler she had been and the woman she had forgotten how to be. The Guardian swung its crystalline limb, but Rylan ducked beneath the blow, plunging the broken shard into the beast's core, where the obsidian plates were weakest. The Guardian convulsed violently, its body flickering with unstable energy as cracks spiderwebbed across its dark form. Then, with a thunderous shudder, it collapsed beside its fallen twin, its blue fire eyes dimming into darkness. An unnatural silence spread across the arena, heavy and breathless, as thousands of nobles stared in disbelief at the lone human standing amidst the ruins of three monstrous beasts. Rylan swayed, barely able to stay upright, yet he looked up toward the queen with steady, unflinching eyes. And for the first time in centuries, Queen Lysandra felt her breath hitch, not from anger but from something she had forgotten she was capable of feeling. Awe, mixed with an unfamiliar warmth that unsettled her throne-hardened heart. She rose slowly, the golden veil slipping like liquid light across her shoulders as she stepped to the edge of the balcony. Her voice resonated across the arena with a softness that surprised even her advisors. She declared that the human had proven more than survival. He had demonstrated courage, spirit, and unwavering resolve, qualities Athelion had once cherished before fear had become its ruling force. Yet her words trembled slightly at the edges as she admitted that no outsider, no warrior, no noble had ever shown such fearlessness under her gaze. The nobles whispered nervously, sensing a shift in their queen's tone, for her voice was no longer the cold, unbreakable blade they knew, but something warmer, alive, dangerous in its openness. The queen descended from her balcony in a swirl of light, her presence rippling through the arena like a tide of power, and for the first time she walked toward a challenger instead of commanding from afar. Her advisors hurried behind her, whispering warnings, but she ignored them, every step heavy with unspoken thoughts. The arena guards parted before her as she approached Rylan, where he stood bloodied yet unbowed. She studied him closely, searching his eyes for the source of his strength, and she felt her heart twist again when she found no hatred there, no resentment, only a quiet endurance that radiated like a steady flame. And it was this flame that made her realize how hollow her empire had become. Rylan bowed slightly, not in submission but in respect, and this small gesture struck Lysandra harder than any defiance he had shown earlier, for no one had offered her genuine respect in centuries, only fear disguised as reverence. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable, as she reached out and brushed a fingertip against the blood on his cheek, a gesture that shocked the nobles into silence. Her voice soft but commanding as she proclaimed that the human would not die today, that he had earned the right to live, to speak, to be heard. And the court trembled at her words, for in that single declaration she had broken her own laws, shattered centuries of tradition, and placed a human at the center of Athelion's heart. The nobles erupted, some protesting, others demanding explanations, but Lysandra silenced them with a single glance, her power radiating like a tidal wave. She turned back to Rylan and told him that his survival was more than a spectacle. It was a message, a reminder that fear was not the only force that shaped civilizations. And she felt her voice tremble as she added that he had reminded her of something she had long forgotten, something she would reclaim. The arena pulsed with energy as the guards lowered their weapons, recognizing the shift in the queen's intent, and as she ordered Rylan to be taken into the palace, not as a prisoner but as a guest, the court watched in stunned awe, knowing the human had done the impossible. He had forced their queen to feel, to question, to change, and Athelion itself trembled in anticipation of what this meant for every soul under her rule. Rylan was escorted from the arena not by chains but by guards, who walked with uncertain respect, their steps hesitant, as though unsure how to treat someone their queen had publicly chosen to spare. The palace corridors glowed with soft violet light that pulsed like a heartbeat through the ancient stone, and as Rylan walked he could feel the eyes of attendants and nobles watching him from behind curtains and doorways, whispering of prophecy, rebellion, and impossible change. Yet beneath their fear and fascination he sensed something deeper, a hope that flickered like a hidden ember beneath 1,000 years of silence, and he wondered if the queen knew how deeply her choice had already begun to reshape her world. He was taken to a chamber carved from luminous marble, warmer and softer than the cold prison he had expected. Attendants brought water and healing cloths, their hands trembling as they cleaned his wounds, whispering in awe of the human who had defeated the sacred beasts and survived the queen's wrath. Rylan thanked them with gentle words, surprising them even more, for kindness was rare in the palace of Athelion. The attendants exchanged glances, as if realizing they were witnessing the beginning of something larger than themselves, something their world had not seen in ages. The slow unraveling of a reign built on fear, and Rylan felt a quiet resolve settle in his chest, knowing that whatever came next, he would not let the queen face it alone. Queen Lysandra entered without announcement, the chamber brightening as her presence draped the room in shimmering gold. The attendants fell to their knees, but she dismissed them with a flick of her hand, leaving only her and Rylan in the stillness. She studied him in silence for a long moment, her gaze soft yet searching, as though trying to understand the force within him that refused to break, the force that had shaken her to her core. She stepped closer with slow, measured grace, her voice low, as she admitted that his defiance in the throne room had unsettled her more than any battle, that his survival in the arena had forced her to confront truths she had buried beneath centuries of rule, truths about her people, her throne, and herself. Rylan listened without judgment, his expression open, and this alone made Lysandra falter, for she was used to eyes filled with fear or flattery, never honesty. She confessed that she had once ruled with compassion, long before power and politics twisted her throne into a cage. She told him of rivals who sought to overthrow her, alliances built on manipulation, nobles who demanded fear as the price of loyalty, until she became the weapon they expected her to be, the ruler who survived by forcing obedience, not trust. Rylan stepped closer, the warm glow of her light brushing his skin as he told her that fear might control a kingdom, but it could never shape a future worth living. And those words struck her like a blade of truth, carving through centuries of silence. For the first time in ages, Lysandra felt the weight of vulnerability press against her armor of authority. Yet instead of recoiling, she found herself stepping nearer to the human, drawn to the steady calm in his gaze, She whispered that his survival had cracked the foundations of the court, that nobles were already plotting to challenge her for showing weakness. Yet, when Rylan asked if she believed compassion was weakness, she felt her breath catch, realizing that she no longer did. Not after seeing the strength of a mortal who fought without magic, without lineage, without fear, and emerged standing. She reached out, her fingers hovering near his cheek, uncertain, until he leaned into her touch, a gesture so simple and human that it shattered the last barricade around her heart. Their closeness became a spark that ignited whispers across the palace, rumors spilling like wildfire through the crystal halls. Nobles gathered in secret chambers debating rebellion, some calling the queen compromised, others calling her renewed. The high priestess warned of omens while military commanders whispered of coups. Yet Lysandra ignored their fear-ridden predictions, for she had made her decision. She summoned her council to the Grand Hall, appearing not as a tyrant but as the ruler she once vowed to be, her golden veil cast aside to reveal the radiant clarity in her gaze. She stood strong as she announced that the days of fear-ruled governance were over, that courage and unity would shape the new Athelion, a proclamation that sent shockwaves through every soul present. The council erupted in chaos, some shouting warnings, others demanding her reversal, but Lysandra lifted a hand and the hall fell silent, her voice unwavering as she declared that, if any wished to challenge her leadership, they were welcome to stand against her openly, not from shadows and whispers. Yet none stepped forward, for though fear no longer defined her reign, the memory of her power still held weight, and the presence of the human at her side, standing tall and unbroken, added a new and unfamiliar strength to her authority, one that the nobles could not easily dismiss. She announced reforms that would dismantle the cruel traditions of the arena, redistribute power across the provinces, and give voice back to the people she had long silenced. Yet rebellion did not disappear. A faction of nobles, unwilling to accept change, moved to seize control of the palace, launching an attack under the veil of night. Shadows raced through the corridors, blades drawn, magic tense like coiled serpents. But Rylan was ready. He had sensed the unrest growing like a storm on the horizon, and took his place at Lysandra's side as the first rebels breached the inner courtyard. They fought not as monarch and subject, but as equals, their movements complementing each other, her golden energy crackling like living fire, while his precision and instinct carved a path through the chaos. The palace trembled with the force of clashing ideals as the old world battled the new. In the heart of the conflict, Lysandra faced the High Lord of the rebel faction, a man who had once sworn loyalty to her before twisting his allegiance to fear. He accused her of betraying her throne, of choosing a human over her own bloodline, but her voice thundered through the courtyard as she declared that she was choosing her people, choosing a future unbound by tradition and terror, and the golden aura around her flared as she struck him down, ending the rebellion in a blinding surge of power. When the dust settled, the remaining rebels threw down their weapons, surrendering not to fear but to the undeniable truth that the queen they once feared had become stronger by embracing the humanity she had forgotten. In the days that followed, Athelion transformed, not overnight, but with steady, deliberate steps guided by Lysandra's renewed spirit and Rylan's unyielding resolve. The arena was dismantled, its sacred beasts freed into the wilds. The nobles were stripped of their unchecked power, and the people slowly began to lift their heads, daring to hope for a better future. Rylan remained by the queen's side, not as a symbol or trophy, but as a partner in rebuilding a world long lost to shadows. And Lysandra found in him a strength she had never known, a reminder that true power came not from fear but from connection, courage, and the willingness to change. And as they stood together atop the palace balcony, watching the dawn rise over a world reborn, the entire court understood a single truth. The human had not merely survived their queen, he had transformed her, and in doing so he had transformed the fate of Athelion forever.